tuning in to another episode of the Berardo Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Berardo. Each episode I focus on giving you fun, entertaining content on health, happiness, positivity, and anything else that's important to us humans. If you haven't already, you can follow me on Instagram at the Berardo, and don't forget to subscribe to the show by visiting theberardo.com/thepodcast, or just click that little subscribe button wherever you're listening to the podcast. Thanks again, and enjoy the episode.
You're just funny. It's funny, the way you tell the story and everything.
Funny how?
Come here though. Yeah, he's crazy, see? Who are you?
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Are you ready?
Today's episode is a lot of fun. It's a long one. Prepare yourself, but it's great. A lot of cool content. I talked to Bobby Hicks. He's actually an old buddy of mine way back in the day. We've known each other for, I think, almost 15 years now. Now he's a Florida State resident. He just moved from New York City, so we talk a little bit about what's been going on up there post-COVID and kind of get his thoughts a little bit from an entrepreneurial side. And, he's an incredible filmmaker and photographer. Him and his girl, Keiko, do some amazing work on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, and they just do some incredible content. So we touch base a little bit on how they started, as well as what kind of the future holds. Now they're in Florida, it's a little bit of a different realm than it was in New York. So I'll leave his Instagram and everything below. So if you want to follow him, check him out. Again, he's just got some great content up there. But I enjoyed this chat. I know you guys will too. Please help me welcome my friend, Mr. Bobby Hicks. Muted you. Oh, hi.
Hi, I'm in the recording now. This is great.
Yeah. This is program Ecamm. I'm like super obsessed with now. That's how I do all my podcasts now, because I create like these overlays, and now that I have the Stream Deck, kudos for all the good advice you gave me. I could just pop in like socials, press a little button, and
look at that. I saw that slide right in there.
Oh, what slide? What, this one? Ooh. But,
I feel like it's terrible to give us like toys like this, because I'm like you are very similar to me, where I'm just like so easily entertained. I'm just like, just push the button. Just watch it disappear.
Dude, I got that Christmas Day, and on like 3 p.m. on Christmas Day, I was just up here forever, and Brenda comes up to me and she's like, so hey, how's that? Because she got it for me. She's like, hey, how's that thing? Are you enjoying it? I go, look at this. And I'm pressing these little buttons, and I'm doing this thing like testing. She's like, wait, that's all it does? And I was like, no, it does a lot more, but look. And I keep, and she's not amused.
Did you ever watch Parks and Recreation?
Oh my God, it's like our favorite show.
Right. So do you remember the moment where he's kind of going through like this depression because he's like not in work. I forget his name off the top of my head, but and Chris Traeger comes by and sees him. He's just like, I just want to make sure you're doing okay, because you seem a little depressed. He's like, what do you mean depressed? Look at this claymation I just made. And then he goes through and he's like, I spent 2 weeks working on this. And he hits like the button. It's like 4 seconds of him like going like this, and it stops. It's like, that's kind of what it reminds me of. Where it's like, a lot of the stuff we do, we spend so much time doing it with like nothing to show for
Ben
it.
Wyatt, when he goes through that whole like
Ben Wyatt.
It's so fantastic. Yeah, I do know Parks and Rec is like one of our go-tos, one of our favorite shows. I'm upset that Netflix lost them, because they went to that stupid Peacock streaming service.
Oh, serious?
Yeah, they just lost it. And then they lost The Office. That went to Peacock. Peacock's like the Netflix of NBC, so they have like all the NBC shows on there. It's stupid.
Yeah. So here's what I'm noticing. I got it. So in my view, right?
Yeah.
I've got like all of this shit over here, but because I still need furniture to put things away. But
right.
In this tiny little box over here, all you actually see is this remote right there. So I'm going to do this. I'm just going to shove that off to the side so that it doesn't look like we're a disgusting mess. So you'll get to look at this you look at these, look at those gym sharks, Are we recording?
Yes, and I could zoom in, and I could do this where I could just follow everything. And there he is. Again, easily amused.
Now we're adults. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that looks much better. Very nice. But dude, I'm
Totally
loving
clean. You know,
I'm loving the
nobody-
setup though. That sun right there is gorgeous.
It's not
It's
bad.
fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, so when it actually when it like I'm still trying to figure out the ideal setup, and the idea is I in my old apartment in New York, which we'll get to all this stuff. But in my old apartment in New York, you know, the rooms, the entire apartment was basically just pure glass. It was just giant floor to ceiling windows, which is really great
Awesome.
in any situation, except when you're doing a lot of computer work, and especially when you're doing something like coloring. And so it makes it very, very difficult for you to act like always kind of have like true color. And so one of the things that really helps is a bias light that I have in the base of my like at the back of my computer, so that it bounces light off of like a true like white off of the wall, so that as I'm working in a black room, you know, I will be able to actually see the true white, so that my eyes kind of have like a white balance to refer to, so that if
Right.
I'm, you know, coloring something, it's not like what I interpret white, it's actually true white.
Mm.
And so I could never really do that at my old place, because it's like it's just glass. So now at least here, like I've got the window, you know, eventually I can add some blackout curtains, so I have the
Yeah.
option. But you know, I was like, today, this is a gorgeous day outside.
It's
I'm
beautiful.
enjoying this. Yeah, I'm enjoying
Yeah,
this for
dude.
everything I've got.
No, man, and I'm sure you're loving the weather. I mean, it's cold out, but it's not New York cold. It's like, what is it? I mean, it's 60 degrees where I'm at. It's probably a little warmer where you're at, but
So we yeah, like I'm down in South Florida, and like near Fort Lauderdale, and you know, we went to the beach today, take some photos in the morning, and
Love it.
got down there, and I'm just like looking at this. I'm like, man, I just want to go jump in the water. Like I just want to go swimming in the ocean. And Keiko's like, it's absolutely freezing outside. Like you don't want to go do that. I'm like, yes, I do. Yeah. Like I'm all about that cold life. So
yeah,
Florida is a
dude.
different kind of cold, though. I mean, it's like it's like I have friends that are you know, like in the elements, and they're just like, you got to be joking me, like Florida cold, like that's not even a thing. And I'm
No,
like, it's different. It's because the humidity, it just gets you. You know, it's like even when
for
it's
sure.
not cold, it just feels more. Whereas like I can be in pure snow and just walk around with a t-shirt and feel so much better.
That is true. Yeah, it's very interesting how, like, even the heat too. I mean, the heat hits you differently in Florida. The heat hits you differently in other states versus here. And then same thing with the cold. Like the cold hits you in Florida. Everyone makes fun of it, but a 60-degree in Florida is actually pretty chilly.
Yeah.
You know.
I'm trying to. So I've been doing my own haircut for the last like year. It's just
Well,
like
I thought you've done that since high school.
I kind of have, but it's like it's been doing this miserable fucking thing where it just like nothing makes sense now. And
Yeah.
I've got like a what's that cartoon? But anyway, I'm just
Johnny
gonna throw
Bravo?
this guy- not even a Johnny Bravo. Like I used to have a Johnny Bravo. Now I've got like it's like that animated character that has like the hair that corkscrews up and stuff. And it was a really shitty cartoon.
Oh,
you know what I mean? It was like
yeah, I know what you mean. Now
early
you
day
look,
3D.
yeah, now
not anymore.
you look more like
I get
him.
that.
Yeah.
I get the hat, but you know, fuck that guy.
Dude, I literally just got a haircut for the first time in like 6 weeks, I think, like before, because my barber has been on vacation since before Christmas, and I enjoy not having a nice haircut, like throwing on a hat and a beanie, and I'm regretting even like waking up this morning and doing my hair. But it is kind of funny that doing your hair, there's something about that, right? Like doing your hair, your beard, or whatever you got going on. I mean, I can't grow facial hair for the life of me, but there's something about getting up and doing your hair. It makes me more productive. And I'm sure
Yeah.
girls could probably relate more than us, but I feel like when I have longer, shittier hair, I'm less productive. It's weird.
Doing my hair makes me feel miserable. Like, you know, like I literally just want to do as little as possible. Like I take I trim, I cut my hair a lot, and I just take like trimmers. I'll just like shave around the sides and everything like this. And even Keiko's just like, how did you do that? It looks so good. I'm like, I know. But now after like 6 months of doing this, the top is just getting so long and the sides are so short. And so it's just like, it just
You don't know what to do.
falls Gravity doesn't have an idea, and so I'm just kind of like, I'm fucking over it, man. Like I just wanna cut it, like
Shave it,
short.
dude. Shave it all off.
What do you think?
Oy vey. Hey, so side note, anyway, we'll get to business eventually. I'm going to do this. Check this out. I could zoom in so that way we're even. I've done like 5 podcasts with this thing and this new stream deck, and it's been, I mean, I enjoyed them, which is all that counts, but it's been very, very minimal to my my usual podcasts that are actually semi-educational, that have topics in mind. These are just like me fucking around. It's awesome.
Well, it's funny because it's like the one that I did before, that like just before we jumped on, like I was doing the chat with Kim Fox, who's a kettlebell sport legend,
Yeah,
female,
that's
like
sick. Yeah.
absolute legend. And I was using Zoom, and I love Zoom. Oh, I'm in the recording, but I love Zoom because it's one of those things where like you can just change the background. So like I've done this so many times where I actually have like a green screen. I have everything. I'll set up like a full like backdrop so I can put up a green screen and have like a super clean key, where basically
Awesome.
it's just like, it's anything I want, like a movie, and, but I didn't have that for this, but it's still one of those things where like, I had like the beach as like a background for
As a
this thing, where it's like,
background,
like the ocean's crashing and stuff. And I was like, it's not very far off. I'm actually like, I was just at the beach.
I'm actually doing it. Yeah. And I'm sure you guys are loving it thus far.
I mean, kind of, yeah. It's like it's one of those things where it doesn't feel real still. It's one of those things where like I still have a hard time kind of understanding that like we live here. The fact that we are like, the house that I am in right now is a house that I'm going to have for years and years. Like
30 probably, to be realistic.
30. Until it's paid off, but and so it's like these little things that kind of like when they pop up, it is kind of just like an interesting reminder, but in general though, it's like, I was a little nervous about like, one, just being down here because Keiko and I have been taking things like super, super seriously with COVID and stuff, like, she's high risk. And, it's like when we were in New York, we had early bouts with that, where like we locked down and took that shit seriously, and it was shut down really, really quickly because New Yorkers don't fuck around. And then it's like and then like we blindly, without seeing it, purchase a home in New York down here in Florida. And the whole time like we had the hardest time being able to actually like champion it and celebrate it, because we were just like, but Florida is definitely known for just fucking everything up. And so we're both kind of like, I'm, at least me, like I'm a little more like pleasantly surprised to see that like most people down here in general are just very, very cautious. Like, you go to a grocery store and like people are, very respectful. Like everybody wears a mask and stuff like this, like Publix or whatever, and it's not the way I anticipated it like playing out, where I thought people were going to be like weird about it.
Yeah, I think, and I'm glad you said that, because it's funny too, because I talked to those with a couple friends that don't live in Florida. In fact, the last podcast I just did earlier today with my buddy that lives in Texas, we're having a similar conversation, how I think people are more attracted to the idea of kind of like the stereotypical states that we're used to, because it's funnier that way. So like Florida falls in that genre of, you always see the memes of like Florida Walmarts, and like that's the funny thing. And Texas, my buddy that lives in Austin, had a very similar thing where he's like, dude, because we were talking about COVID and the restrictions and all that, because when you think Texas, you're thinking everyone's running around with the 9mm in their waist and a rebel flag, and their house has AK-47. Like that's kind of the hard right is what you're envisioning. But if you ever physically go to Texas, it's quite the opposite. It's very progressive, but also conservative. They're just very into like their rights and all that, but they're very pleasant people, and they're not what you think driving around F-150s. And I think, to your point, Florida's a lot like that, where maybe like 25 years ago we were pretty bad, but you're starting to see Fort Lauderdale in particular, because I used to live in Fort Lauderdale. I think like 8 years ago is when I moved out. But I was down there for like 4 or 5 years helping a buddy run a company, and Fort Lauderdale's, it's getting there. It's kind of like trying to be the new Miami, but it's not as like Kardashian out of Miami, if that makes sense. You know,
Yeah, I
it's
love it.
yeah, it's getting there. So it's interesting. It's very
By
interesting to
the
see how that
by the
plays
way,
out.
like quick side tangent, it's like
Yeah.
I'm still, as we can tell, like still I have no setup yet. So it's like normally I would have like a nice light and all this stuff. And as it's going to get darker, my face is going to get probably darker as well, to the point where this overhead light is going to do absolutely nothing. So apologies in advance for your video quality.
Well, this is the good news about I purposely asked you. I was like, "Yo, dude, let's do a podcast." And you're like, "Well, I'm getting set up." I was like, "Yeah, right when you get set up," because I wanted to make sure my shit was better than yours. And then, so that's perfect. Because this will
Yeah,
be the
next-
only time that we do a podcast that my stuff actually might be better than yours.
It's going to be the only time in history.
I don't know if I want to do another one, like when you get everything set up and get your key lights and shit. I'm like, nah, I'm good. We'll just do audio only.
The best part about it is that I actually so one of the we upgraded from like a 2-bedroom apartment into a 4-bedroom house, which is absolutely blowing my mind right now, because also it's a 4-bedroom house, but like the rest of the house is bigger than like our apartment ever was, without even a room. And so it's like we have like a designated room right now that is specifically for our studio photography and video and stuff. And I walked in there and I was like, yeah, maybe I'll grab like a C-stand, and like I'll grab like one of my like Young UOY 360 like tube lights, and I'll set that up like right here and kind of illuminate. And I walk into the room and there are no C-stands, because they're in the garage. The light itself that I was looking for, which is like a very like minimal tube light and stuff that would be easy to kind of like set up and not have like a giant thing in the camera in my face. Like it's not here, it's outside, which is downstairs. Which is, again, I'm in a 2-story house. Like this is blowing my mind. But I was just like, no, I'm not fucking going down there. So Tony was like, what you get?
I'm just happy. I'm happy. And I wasn't really a big fan of doing, I think we talked about this before, where I wasn't like really big into doing YouTube videos and stuff. Just because it seemed like a lot of work. But then once I got like the Stream Deck and this Ecamm Live and my Rodecaster, and once I'm kind of integrating all these like systems into the podcast, it's streamlining it to where I could literally press a button on one platform, which is Ecamm. It records everything, and then I don't even bring it into Premiere because I do my intro before I talk to you, and my music and all that, and the video is all done through Ecamm. So I just press record, and then that's it, and then I upload it right to YouTube. I don't even, because that was my biggest problem when I first started my podcast, was like I didn't want to do YouTube because I was like picking apart like all the podcasts I see, that double cameras and 5 key lights and some backdrops, and I'm like, that's just a lot of shit. Like I'm not, especially because I'm such a fan of podcasts, and I know you are too, where I'm such an audio consumer.
Yeah.
I know there's huge value in video, but I just didn't see it at the time about a year ago. So I just started doing YouTube, and I'm just like, it's kind of working now because everything's virtual. So it's a little bit easier doing this program because I could just call people up, like my buddy that lives in Texas that I just did a podcast with. Like I'm never going to see him in studio. Like he's never going to come and do a podcast and then leave the next day.
Yeah.
So it's kind of beneficial, but yeah, it's just a lot of work, dude. Like I know what you guys do. Like, I mean, it's crazy the amount of work you guys put into the video making and the quality. And it's pretty inspirational to see, man. We've, as long as I've been following you, as long as I've known you, just to see what, you've grown into be. From a video content creator and just the filmmaking that you do, it's pretty inspirational, man. I'm proud of you.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's kind of funny because I have to remind myself often. So I mean, I guess at this point, like we're probably actually going live, right? It's like for anybody, for anybody that doesn't know, it's like Tony and I, we've known each other since high school, and it's like I feel like in general, not much has changed for the two of us. Like our lives have definitely evolved and adapted, but it's like I'm still just the same fast talking maniacal person that you knew when we were like 16 to 18 and such. I never in my wildest dreams actually would have thought that this is kind of what I'm doing, like back then. Like I had no ambition, like I worked at a Domino's, on and off. Like it's actually really funny because Keiko, like she oftentimes will kind of like bring this back up and stuff. And she was like, because she lived in Orlando around the time that I was working there. And she was like, you were the worst employee ever. Like you were, she was like, you were known for being at work. And I would just like randomly just like call her up and stuff and be like, hey, what are you up to? You know, I'm taking a delivery over like near you and stuff. So I'll drop something off. I'll drop my food off and I'll hang out with you for a little bit. And I would literally drop off food and then just go to like her house and just hang out there for 20 minutes and then go back and then do it again like later on and stuff just throughout the day. Or I would just like not show up to work and stuff because I was just like a shitty kid that just didn't care about working at Domino's, you know. I all I cared about was like playing music and having fun, and I was fine with making $15, you know, like,
Right.
you know, in tips, you know.
And you were good with it, yeah.
When time came to move to New York, you know, like it wasn't like this forced upon me thing, you know. I would move to New York. She'd been there for about a year, and you know, we weren't even dating. We were actually just friends. But it was one of those things where we both wanted to date. I wanted to date her, but I didn't want to do a long distance thing. So
Right.
I knew that I had to get to New York. And so it was one of those things where I decided to actually take life seriously. And so like for about 6-7 months, I worked at that Domino's. I worked harder than any person ever had. You know, I saved every single cent that I could. I was living back in my parents' house, you know, and I lived on a diet of literally rice, frozen tilapia, and then like broccoli, you know. And I would just like,
ironically, no pizza.
like rarely, like because I
Yeah.
work there. It's like if I did, like I might have a little bit, but I mean, I also weighed I think about like 130 pounds, you know.
Oh yeah, you were a twig.
And think about right now, it's like I weigh about like let's say like 205 maybe on like a day when I'm full in the belly, you know. But like in general, I dance between like 198 and 205 on like a regular basis, you know. And very different physique of it though. But you know, it's like when I was down there, I took it so seriously and you know, saved up every single cent that I could. I managed to save up like $7,000, which at the time blew my fucking mind. You know,
Yeah.
like never in my life had I seen so much money. And you know,
That's
it's
like
like
30 grand now.
yeah, pretty much. And like I bought like a one-way ticket. I shipped up a UPS box with like some essentials, you know, and moved to New York. And it was like basically overnight. I had to grow up and be, you know, it wasn't even like I had to. Like I just made the decision one day to kind of like take things a little more seriously. And you know, it's like over those years when I was first in New York, I had no real experience. You know, I went
Now
into like
was Keiko blogging at the time? That's
yeah,
all she was doing, right? Yeah.
yeah. She's been doing that since like did you ever hear of LiveJournal? Like that was like a
Oh,
big
wow.
thing. Yeah. So she
Yeah.
actually was like very, very popular in LiveJournal even back in the day because she would journal really well. Like, you know, she had like really thoughtful, you know, before a blog was even a word, you know, blog wasn't even a word. It was just
Yeah.
like something that she actually enjoyed doing. She wrote out really thoughtful remarks. It was a nice like outlet for her. She would take pictures and kind of share them as well, just kind of like what's going on. And she was able to develop an audience that people actually were able to kind of like resonate and connect with. And then, you know, it's like eventually the idea of a blog kind of popped up. And I like very, very much remember this happening because I was just like, that is the dumbest word. I hate that word. The word blog, it just makes me feel like horrible inside, you know?
Well, and it
And
makes no sense. Like no one, we
no,
know what it is, but like we all know words are words and words were just made up. But the word blog was like someone took zero thought into making that
so,
word up.
somebody was just like really high, you know? But yeah,
Blog.
blog. And it's like, you know, it's like she basically like built out a website and kind of started doing that because it was just the next logical progression. And you know, after doing that, she like managed to still have a massive growing of people that would check it out and visit it and get like all of the views. And yeah, I mean, like she was one of the first people that when companies and like brands were coming out to people and saying, hey, you know, we actually see the value in this. We would like to offer you some money in exchange for maybe some space on your blog, your website, so we can put like a banner down here or something. Or, you know, like, would you be willing to do an article? You know, and again, like they weren't even blog posts. It was more like genuine articles at that time where it's just like, can you write us like a thoughtful, like thing about our product?
Right.
And, like maybe we can figure out a solution with money. And it was
It's
kind of
awesome.
amazing because at a certain point, like she ended up meeting Karen, Karen Rabinovitz, who is basically like the founder of the agency that she's been with for a long time. And Karen wasn't like necessarily representing her individually, but like she basically was one of the first people to put together this idea of just like she always has been the person to see like a big picture where nobody else would see something. And she was like, let me represent people that have like a small platform, which we now know are like influencers or bloggers, like before literally
It
people
even
were laughing
existed.
at
Yeah.
her. Yeah, people were laughing at her and they were saying like this is an absolute waste of money. Like nobody wanted to invest in her. She did it herself. And it turned out to be, I mean, DBA is one of the biggest agencies when it comes to representing talent or things like that, like now. So it's just kind of insane to see like the evolution of things. But going full
It's wild.
circle, yeah, but going full circle, it's one of those things where like I had to, basically because I was now taking her photos, I didn't know how to take photos, like Keiko had to basically test the photos on me, and then like, you know, give me the camera, and then I would just point the like push the button and point the
Yeah.
camera at this. Just kind of that's how we got photos. And it was one of those things where like after a while, I eventually started to intuitively kind of like pick things up. And then when I started to finally enjoy doing it for myself, that's when things kind of clicked. I wanted to take more initiative. YouTube was actually starting to become more popular, and all of a sudden you're starting to see like more tutorial videos and like this is how you can do this or this is a fun thing. And it's just like over the span of like several years, you were able to learn everything. And I don't know, man. I mean, it's just like it's kind of wild when I actually think about like how much I know now, but without any actual formal training. Like I never went to school
Yeah.
for this stuff. I ask questions, and I feel like that's
Learn.
like, yeah, what's it like Socratic method? It's just
Yeah.
like that's the only way I really learned anything. I was just fucking garbage
Yeah.
in high school.
No shit. Yeah, we all were. And, people always make fun of that method, that Socratic method. But if you're educated enough to kind of understand and look back and use critical thinking skills and say to yourself,
Yeah.
well, how did we learn like as cavemen? How were we able to like figure out what fire is? And then, how many years did it take to let us understand that we can actually use this fire to cook and to hunt and to light up the room and, all these different types of things. And that's just through trial and error. And that's really all you're doing as a creator. Or if you want to learn anything or learn a new language, or, if you want to pick something up, you don't have to go to school for it. And I think that's the perception we has is like, you have to go, and do X amount of courses for 4 years. And you have to listen to a professor that knows what he's talking about. And he's above the age of 50. And, really, if you just kind of take the liberty upon yourself to learn that information and, through repeating it and doing it, you can, be really good at it. And I mean,
Yeah.
you've been able to do it. I mean, just in the past, 10 years, bro, it's crazy. I mean, anytime someone needs any type of advice or, like I love your lighting tutorials you do. I picked up a lot of stuff from there. Hence, if you are watching this on YouTube, a lot of this is compliments of Bobby Hicks, FYI.
Side note, if you are watching this on YouTube, do not judge my fucking garbage setup. Because
I'm gonna blur you.
work.
I'm gonna blur you out of this whole thing.
Yeah, it's just a tone, But yeah, and I think the thing that's even crazier is just the fact that, going back, like when we were in high school, you had guidance counselors, you had, like people that were really advocating for, I mean, like I think we did have a great school, and like we really did have some teachers that were so passionate about seeing us succeed,
Course.
and the thing is, like at that time, we're aging ourselves a little bit, but it's like at that time, it is one of those things where there was no other option. You either went to college, you got a 4-year degree or more, and you pursued whatever that career was, or like you just didn't fit in. It's like that's the way I grew up, where I was always told that it's like if I didn't have a 4-year education, I literally would have no possible job whatsoever. I got like a BA, like like I was fine with that. Like I knew very early on that that's not exactly. I didn't want to go into like a very traditional role, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just
Sure.
one of those things where it's like I think for me early on, I was able to understand that like my attention span, everything else, like I just need to be doing something a little more creative and something a little more, um,
Yeah.
uh, freeing. Like in this mind-blowing way, I'm able to actually make a living having, the freedom to like literally travel anywhere I want in the entire country or the world at any given time and still be able to create content, on a deadline or on a budget, um, is kind of
Yeah,
wow.
and it's cool to see, man, for sure. I mean, the whole attitude of content creating, what people would say as influencers. And I don't know how you feel about that word, but me personally, I mean, you can call it that if you want, but I just think entrepreneur fits better in that realm because if I wanted to start a company, no matter what type of company that was, and I was to grow into that type of space. I mean, that's really what you are. Is you're an entrepreneur and you're using your craft to give a service,
Yeah,
and I think that's more fitting.
I think the person that came up with influencer also was the one that came up with blog, So like, because I equally hate both. Where it's like the idea of like it kind
Yeah,
of goes back to it kind of goes back to that quote from Andy Warhol, where he was just like, in the future, everyone will have their 15 seconds of fame,
yep,
maybe
great
it's
quote.
minutes. I think it's seconds, but it's one of
Yeah,
those things where it's just like that's how it feels for me. Where it's just like like, I feel like maybe 5 or 10 years ago, it was like when the word was starting to creep out, like it had, I don't want to say more integrity, because that, I mean, like that's beside the point. It's not about integrity. It's just one of
right.
those things where it's like literally people are writing influencer as like a job resume kind of thing, like when they're applying to places. And it's at the end of the day, it's just like, you can be a quote influencer by having a viral TikTok when you like managed to take a video of your dog taking a shit in the grass and like it did something funny while it was doing it. Like
Right.
I feel like the difference between and kind of like how you put it, like I love the idea of an entrepreneur, but like when people ask me like what I do for an occupation, I tell them I'm a photographer or I'm a filmmaker because that's really what pays the bills, And at the
Yeah.
end of the day, it's not about respect. I truly don't care if somebody respects or doesn't respect what I do, but
Right on.
it is one of those things where I feel like it's important to make sure that like you're not propping yourself up on a false pedestal or
Right.
just kind of like like it reminds me of Mario where it's like you're running, you see like the box with a question mark and it's just like that's what I do. It's just like what does that even mean? You influence people and that's wonderful, but that's also
Yeah.
just like that's the nature of social media,
Exactly.
you either
Yeah.
consume or you influence.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. Consumer influence, and then it's great to see too that you both could generate a healthy income, especially up in New York. Um, so I'm sure being down in Florida now, it's a little less stressful if there was any stress, which there might not be. But if there was, I would imagine it's a little bit more heightened in New York. But I mean, how do you guys typically plan out? Do brands come to you guys, and do you guys work out some type of sponsorship program to where you can bring value to them? Like, how does that typically go down? Does it vary each partner that you guys work with?
So, I mean, it's actually a really great question because it's a common one that like Keiko and I both get, but it's something where I think it varies from person to person because we are very, very fortunate to both be represented by really great agencies. They're different agencies, but like she's with DBA, I'm with Socialite. They're both based in New York and LA.
Hmm.
And commonly, like a brand will come to said agency and be like, hey, we have X budget. We would like to actually put out like X amount of content. Can we make this happen for 3 people or 5 people or whatever it might be? They
Right.
basically come with like a product and a scope of work, like an idea of like what you should be doing, and then just kind of try to like arrange that. And then the agents themselves are responsible for, either pitching it to an individual person or like in proper situations I feel like to the most appropriate person, because like for
Right.
example, I don't drink, so like I've explained to them like even though booze brands like really do have great budgets, like I'm not going to do that, and so they know not to really come to me with something for like a vodka
Mm,
company, because
that makes sense.
even though it's great money, I don't have any interest in partnering with them. So
Right.
themselves are kind of taking a lot of these factors into account and kind of being like, well, Bobby, he does a lot of stuff with, like photography and this and stuff like that, but he also, has done stuff in the past with, let's say like housing goods or skincare, or just like general like fashion, just regular clothing companies. And so it makes it kind of simple for them to come to me being like, hey, is this something that you would like to take? Here's like the list of what they're asking for. This is like, the budget, and this is the amount of time that you have to complete it. Let us know. And I'm almost always kind of just like, yes.
Do
But
it, yeah.
sometimes, yeah. But sometimes, honestly, like companies will like personally write to me, like in a direct message or an email, and they'll just reach out, which I think is
Yeah.
actually an incredible way to actually work with somebody. And this is what I tell people all the time as well, is that it's like you can't wait for an agency to come to you, because I didn't have an agency for a long time, but if you actually take the initiative and you actually reach out to companies, you're like, what can I do? If you develop a relationship like that, that has actually helped me out so much in the past, where I've been willing to actually do something, you know, whether it's big or small. I'm willing to do something for a company because I believe in who they are, or their brand, their message. And eventually, when they do have a budget, they're able to come back and be like, hey, we actually have a budget this time and we'd love to pay you. And then moving forward, I've not only established a strong relationship with a company, but also the individuals. So oftentimes when they decide to actually move on to a different company, or like they leave the one that they're at, they do their own thing, I am one of the first people that they think of. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it might be the same thing, it might be like no budget, but it's one of those things where like I'm not doing this solely for the idea of making money. Like
Yeah.
I am very fortunate that Keiko and I both do the same thing, and we both look out for each other, and we both have the same mentality of kind of trying to like save our cash and like make it last, because we both are very aware of the fact that like we might not be able to do this tomorrow, you know.
Right.
And so in that realm, it's just like we're able to kind of like take a little risks here and there, but do more like passion projects if we want to. So
No, dude, that's smart. That's smart. And I love what you said too about reaching out to the brands, because I think that's huge, especially with everything that's been going on across the country with the pandemic and all that. Whether it's a local business or a big business, doesn't matter. But if we can constantly reach out to each other and eliminate some of these third parties, if it does happen, that's how I got my sponsors for the podcasts. I reached out to them just because I believed in their product, and that's what I love about your content, is whether it's a video or a photo, like I know for sure that you use it and that you don't talk shit about it. And I know if I buy it, I could trust it because it's coming from you and you like it. And
yeah,
that's kind of how the same way I feel about mine. Like I had someone reach out to me that wanted to promote, and it wasn't all like a subscription box. I think we talked about this, but they don't have any vegan or plant-based options. So I
yeah,
was like, I don't know if I want to talk about that, because my listeners know that I'm vegan and I talk about a lot of episodes. So if I was to preach that, I don't know if there's validity in that, but I don't know if I believe in it either.
yeah,
So I think that's really important, especially if you're looking to get into that realm. It's important to reach out to companies and believe in the products, because you see a lot of that shit going on Instagram where like there's conflicting, and I'm sure it bothers you the most because the behind the scenes. But I'll have like one dude that I follow that he has a sponsor and he's doing a little sponsored ad, and then like 3 weeks later it'll be something completely opposing. Like it's like, wait, hold on, didn't you just sponsor this? Like what? Hold on.
love these nicotine patches. These nicotine patches keep me from smoking anything. It's just like vape the fuck out, man. I can't wait to get more nicotine in my system.
And then he's sponsoring Blue the next day. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, dude, that's awesome. So I'm glad I'm glad things are going well and still cranking for you guys. And the big reason I wanted to have you on is now that you're back in Florida, I'm super curious how you feel about being a homeowner now. Because this is the first home, right, that you guys purchased?
Yeah, man. This is, I mean, like,
This is big.
yeah, it's a big house too, which is again
It's
like
massive. Yeah.
yeah. It's honestly, like I said, it still is kind of surreal. Like
Yeah.
even like I was treating moving into this place like a competition. It's like movers came by, dropped off all the boxes, and it's like I tried to unpack every single box within the first night. And it's like to this day, like I still have boxes around the area and stuff, but like it doesn't feel like something that we own yet. We
Yeah.
are still really kind of like hesitant to even like hang pictures up and stuff because it's as simple as it's a very different mentality because it's like when you're in an apartment, you can be like, yeah, let's just hang up a picture here. I don't like where that is, but there's a hole there. I'll fix it later, and then it's
Yeah,
like
who
it's
cares?
fine because you don't need to worry about it. It's like when you move out, your super is going to paint the place anyway, and it's whatever. But now, like I feel like we're both kind of like taking
Careful.
taking our time, being careful,
Yeah.
but at the same time, kind of being like almost afraid to actually like do anything to the walls, make it our own, because it's like we're afraid that I don't know. Then it's almost like then it makes it real,
Yeah. No,
and
I can relate for sure. Yeah.
yeah, but it's like as exciting as it is to have a house, and I mean, it's wild. Like you're like my office is on the second story of the house. I walk up the stairs, I come up here and stuff. We've got two other rooms up here and stuff where Keiko has her office and then a studio. And it's like I'm basically the only one that even comes up here. And even then, I only come up here very rarely, unless I need to use my computer or something, because I'm just not used to it yet. We have a
Yeah.
yard. We have a yard, man. I get to mow my yard. Like
Dude,
it's just weird. I don't even know.
Yeah, no, it's wild, man. I mean, I think when I bought my first home, Brent and I were first dating. Yeah, I get what you're saying about hanging up the. I still didn't do it it took me a couple months to actually do stuff. Command hooks were definitely my friend, that's for sure. I did not nail anything because I was kind of worried. I was like, what if I can't do this? What if I can't pay my mortgage? And like there was so many things going through my brain that were positive and negative. And then eventually after like 6 months, it finally sunk in, and
Yeah.
I accepted the fact. But one thing I love most about it is rewarding once it does sink in to where you're realizing that the rent that you put in every month is actually going to a purpose, as opposed to, renting an apartment or something like that, where there's no accountability on your end from a long-term standpoint, but you're just wasting money on something you don't own. It's very similar to like leasing a car. I use that analogy all the time, to where it's okay to lease a car if you're the type of person that likes to trade in your car every 3 years just because you want change. But if you're worried about payments, you're paying more to have a vehicle that's not yours down the road. My goal when I'm 60 years old is to have 0 payments. So I don't want a house payment. I don't want a car payment. So if I can get to the point where I have, $0 that I have to pay every month, except my fixed stuff like electric and cell phone and shit like that.
Utilities.
Yeah. So if you're making, 2, 3, 4, 5 grand a month, whatever your income is, and you're making that, now you're taking probably 60% and you're paying bills. If you could somehow work down your mortgage to where in 20, 30 years you're paying it off and your car's paid off, now that's all income. That's 100% profit. And that's how you could start your retirement plan. You can go on vacations and you can do trips. And, there's just so many things that I don't think people think about because it's scary. It's scary to buy a house and it's scary to do a lot of that, big boy stuff. But I'm glad you took the plunge because you won't regret it. I think it's going to be exciting for you guys. So.
It's actually like extra crazy about it as well as the fact that it's like stuff like I have had these little moments where I'm just kind of like for no reason whatsoever, just like, man, like these panics, like, well, I don't wonder if I can get like, if I can still cover my mortgage. I have a mortgage now. Like I've never had a mortgage before. And then I actually stop and I think about it and I realize like once I actually step back and I realize like, oh my God, like collectively between the two of us, right? Our mortgage is like 1/3 of the rent that we were paying in New York City for just our apartment,
That's so
and it's
crazy.
like 1/3. And it's like little things like this where like I have like a mini panic attack for like a second. And then all of a sudden, like it kind of clicks and I realize like not only just the logic behind it, but the safety behind it. And I'm just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
wait, I'm good. Like I could literally do nothing for like months and have like one gig come in or something and like I would still be very safe. Now that said, like that's not the idea. Like Keiko and I are still trying to hustle as much as possible. We've got a lot of fun ideas. Now we have a house. We've literally spent like every single day like brainstorming fun new ideas with like concepts and different things that like we want to do with each other. So even for example, like I just started like a new kind of like tiny little mini series where it's like I love my garage gym. I've been building it out. You and I both like kind of nerd out about this shit. And it's like I wanted to be better about like documenting it. And it was like kind of a little like side thing where I was just like, let me just film little bits of what I'm doing and stuff, getting some stall mats is what I did. I drove out to some tiny little town like at the bottom of Lake Okeechobee and got these stall mats, brought them back home, laid them on the ground and stuff. And then I cut together a short little video, did like just so lo-fi. Like I just used my phone and just kind of like talked into that for the voice recording part instead of using like my crazy kit that I have. Like I have like a vocal booth. Like I have everything that I would need to do some crazy shit. I'm doing as little as possible. But even still, it's one of those things where like people got really excited about it, and they were actually like writing to me personally in DMs, being like, "I'm so excited about this. I bought a pull-up bar recently, and like I haven't even installed it yet, and like I'm really looking forward to seeing how you do this," or little things like that have been getting me and even Keiko excited. Where it's just like we now have more space. We don't have to deal with people. It's like, and to be honest, like as much as I love New York, the last year that we were there, 2020, COVID, it's like it felt like we were robbed. It felt like we were in one of the greatest cities in the entire world, and we couldn't enjoy it. And we were just surrounded by people. And it's like in a place where like you already don't really talk to very many people, except for me. I talk to everybody. But it's like in a place where you already like kind of like keep to yourself. It's like when that was happening, it just really changed the dynamic for like living in that city. And so now being over here, it's like we've got the space, we've got like all of these opportunities and the creativity, we've got amazing natural light, but we also have like, thousands of dollars of just like studio light, and so we can do anything we want. And so we've got some really dope ideas that I think I'm very, very excited to like put in the works.
Cool, man. No, I can't wait to see it. Yeah, I love those little videos, like watching how your garage gym's coming together, and it's looking cool. Because I always kind of think to myself when I see videos like that, because I'm saving up some content as well for it. I'm looking to, I'm finishing up my backyard, right? I told you that. And I'm almost done. I'm going to do the brick oven pizza this weekend. But like I laid the concrete myself on the bar and all that. And I'm doing like these little micro clips here and there. And once I put it all together, it's going to be like a, minute and a half video. But to kind of see the progression over the course of like 2, 3, 4, 5 months, by the time I get done with it, I think like from a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid that's watching it, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or whatever, but just to kind of see that, I think is exciting. And that's something that we didn't have as kids. And as fun as I love the long tutorial videos and like the 20-minute do-it-yourself projects and shit, I'm getting more and more excited about like watching someone's Instagram story like yours. And he's like, hey, the garage gym, this is where I'm going to do this, where I'm going to do that. Cause it makes me want to tune in to you every day to kind of see the progress. That's the fun stuff,
Yeah. I feel like there's something definitely relatable there for myself, but also for like most people in the world. Like our attention span literally went from like, I think it was like 13 seconds down to literally like 3 seconds,
Yeah.
And like when we were kids, I think it was actually close to like parents,
Right.
it's like a 30-second attention span you'd always hear. And now it's less than 3 seconds. When it comes to a visual element of things, I feel like 3 minutes is maybe like tops. It's like I feel like on Instagram and stuff like that, like, if I'm on my phone, I don't want to be looking at something for more than 3 minutes. And I know that I have, it's like I personally know that I've made videos that are longer and stuff because it's like I just like to create things. When I'm watching something, I want it to be 1.5 minutes to 3 minutes tops, maybe even less. When I'm working with a company, it's like they'll give you like they encourage like, make a 60-second video. Like I will make a 20-second video because it's like if you can actually cut things down and encapsulate it into like the tiniest little ball possible and just make it punctuated, make it hit the right times, make it like attention grabbing and everything else, that's going to be more effective. When it comes to a podcast though, like I love long form. Like you give me a nice 45 minutes to a 3-hour podcast or whatever and stuff with like just like all of the rants and the breathing and like the silence, everything in between, like that is what I want, and
Same way.
I feel like there's something very unique about the relationship of like audio to video, and so I think that what you're doing is actually really dope because it's like you are doing a really great job of making longer form podcasts, but then you do have like these little snippets that you put up on your feed that are just kind of engaging enough to get people to want to like digest it and be like a little goldfish, like they just go, oh, I like that. Let me come back for more. Yeah, wait, if we go up there, we can actually go get all of it,
That's right.
and I think that's great. you know?
No, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I did notice that when I first started doing like little clips and things like that, where I was doing like 4, 5, 6 minute clips on like IGTV, which is, you know, a great underrated platform, I think, because I really like consuming content that way. But then I realized when I was looking at analytics that people are only watching a minute and a half anyway. So it was a 6 minute clip of my hour and a half long podcast, but they were stopping at a minute and a half. And whether they, you know, said, hey, fuck this, I'm not going to listen to this guy anymore. Or maybe they're like, hey, this is great. Let me go actually listen to the real audio and let me listen to the whole podcast. That's when I was like, okay, I think minute and a half, you know, to your point, 3 minutes is, for me, that's pretty long as well, that I just don't like consuming content that quick. And I think a lot of that has to do with Instagram stories and TikToks and reels and all that, to where people are so used to it now. It's almost like we kind of have to blame the platforms to making our attention span shorter, not because there's so much content, but imagine like 2 years ago if Instagram stories came out, instead of being like you can record for whatever it is, 7 seconds per each clip. What if it was like 20 seconds? Would we watch more of them? You know,
Well,
it almost
I mean,
makes us think, right?
if you actually like jump back and look at it, you know, so there was Vine, and Vine, I think, was like, they were 7 seconds.
7 seconds, yeah.
When Instagram first started, they stood out because they were 15 seconds. So
Right.
you could do 15 seconds, right? But then that's all you could do. So when Instagram like got started, I still got late to that platform because I just didn't care. You know, it's like that's one thing that like I've never been very good at, is kind of just like being, you know, like the Gretzky approach, where it's like skate where the puck's going, you know?
Right, right.
Like I'm kind of the guy that's just like, I'm just gonna sit here and just hang out and then see what's going on.
You were
And
there
just
like after the Zamboni left, like you were
yeah,
literally.
like it had a first pass, you know, like it was nice and soft and shiny. I was like, let's do this shit, you know? And it's
Yeah.
like I jumped in there, do a strict movement of whatever it was, and then especially 7 years ago, and be able to make it so that people would want to watch it in a 15-second window or less, you know,
Right.
that was so difficult.
It's tough.
Now I almost like feel stressed out if somebody is taking too long to do something, and not because like necessarily because my attention span is less. Like it's always been short, you know, but it's yeah, I'm fine. The norm that has been programmed in our DNA from social
Yeah.
media is that it's like you have to make the biggest impact in the shortest period of time and make it as effective as possible. And I feel like that's kind of that's the differentiator between,
Yeah.
and in no way am I trying to like diminish saying like what somebody else is
No,
doing is
no.
worse than what I'm doing, but it's like I'm constantly putting focus and thought into every single thing that I'm doing, so that it's like when I'm sharing a video, like if it feels a certain way, like I spent, you know, for let's say like that 1 minute and a half long video that I did, like it took me hours to do that. And it's just, I shot it with my phone, but it's like because I'm
Right.
taking so much neurotic amounts of time to feel the pacing, to see like what makes the most sense. And it gets even harder when you work down to like advertising, so you
Oh
get your
yeah.
job straight in 15 seconds.
Yeah, I can't imagine that pressure, because like even for me when I do these long forms, which I appreciate you saying that, I love it. It's because you know me, I've always been a talker, and I just love talking these
I love
long
it.
podcasts. And because I'm such a podcast nut, I could appreciate like all the long stories and the 3-4 hour podcast, because the way the platforms are set up, whether you use Apple or Spotify or whatever, but if you are in your car or whatever you're doing, you're running an errand and you listen to a podcast and it's a 30-minute drive, and then you got to get out and get gas and your car turns off, and then right when it turns back on, it starts up again. It's like that to me is the cool thing about a podcast, because I feel like I'm there the entire time and I'm enclosed in these situations and I'm involved in the conversation. So that's what really drove me to doing the podcast, but to try to find like a minute clip of like
It's tough.
especially yeah, like even this conversation right now, like I don't even know where we're at. Like I mean, we're almost at an hour, I think, but we're literally it's gonna be so hard for me to find like an IG clip to pick apart an hour. I'm gonna be so meticulous and so weird about it.
It's
Brenda's
been
gonna
my
divorce
entire
me.
point. I'm just trying to totally trip you up. Welcome to my world. You
Yeah,
know?
dude. So I can't, and I'm not even getting paid for this, so I can't even imagine I have the pressure for it. So
and
all
and
respect, bro.
to
But
preface as well, like just to make it very abundantly clear, it's like 90% of like the stuff that like I create and that Keiko creates, it's like 90% of it is not sponsored. It's one of those things where like we like this is kind of rounding back to that topic, but it's one of those things where I think it's important because a lot of people do also confuse this because there are some people that exclusively post sponsored content and they will take every single job they could possibly get, whether it's $10 or $10,000, and they'll
Hmm.
share and fill their feed with stuff. And that's where that inauthentic kind of like view of
Influencer
what we
bullshit.
do,
Yeah.
that's where that kind of that like that bubble has grown from. Because at the end of the day, I feel like the audience that Keiko and I have, like, we've worked very, very hard to earn that, and it's one of those things where like when we have an opinion about something, whether it's a political thing or fashion thing or something else that like we put out there, we are able to express exactly what we were thinking and feeling wholeheartedly without really like a lot of worry about people thinking that it's inauthentic because
Or
people come
judgment or
along.
anything like that.
Yeah, because people
Yeah.
come along for the journey. Like, granted, there are always going to be people with judgment, but it's one of those things where like the majority of the people that want to actually like follow like your platform, if you take the time to actually curate it the way that you should and make it true, you know, um, you should be willing to invest as much time as possible to make sure that like 90% of the content that you make is sponsor free if you are
Right.
looking for sponsored jobs, because like
100.
the more
Yeah.
that you do, the more opportunity you get to actually get these jobs. Brands want to see this.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. No, I think being authentic is so huge with social media. I think people get confused with, I talk about it all the time where I even like created these canvases that I hang up in my office that in my studio that I really live by, which is like, just being you when you wake up every single day. Just like I've always had that mentality. And
Mhm.
when you wake up and you worry about what's on the phone and you watch all these influencers, celebrities, like all that stuff, like I always bitch to Brenda all the time because every time like at 6 p.m. or something, she'll go through and she's like, guess who Brad Pitt divorced today? And I'm just, or, whatever he's dating. I don't know. I don't follow that shit. But like she'll always say something like that. And I'm like, why? Like, I get you want to follow, but like, why though? Like, who cares? Like, I get it's a novel. You want to read it. Like, it's an exciting life. But, then you get invested in these people and, you're not true authentic to yourself because you're worried about being that person or, using the same makeup as the Kim Kardashian. And, you got to be careful of that. Just do you. And if you want to document it, cool. But if not, don't sweat it because then you're going to be a little bit more worried when people judge you. I feel like if you care more about what people are doing on that platform, then when people talk shit to you, you're going to care about that. And we shouldn't really care about what people are talking shit to us. I mean, it's always going to happen, but
It's one of those things where I feel like the people that actually are doing something because they invest themselves into it, they will have legs to stand on when it comes time for somebody kicking it, like kicking them down,
exactly.
because like a lot of the people that I'm friends with that like have tried to do, and again, like I'm not, it's not easy to invest like your whole life into what you were doing, on a
Yeah.
platform that is open for the world, and at the same time, kind of like keeping as much as you can private while at the same time showing. I mean, it's almost so
Love.
interesting because
Yeah.
it's like our actual life, is one of those things where like like our home or like our car or things like this, like we try not to share anything like that, anything too personal, we try not to share like stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like we don't feel like there's anything wrong with actually sharing like how frustrated we are with something or with each other, or like if we're having a good day or a bad day, or like
Right.
showing like our flaws, like
Cause
like
that's you, man. Yeah. It's
yeah,
you.
and I feel like that it's like this tightrope that you have to walk, of kind of like being able to balance like who you actually are as a person, 24/7. If you are using a platform, and at the same time being willing to say like this is too overwhelming, I'm taking a step back and stepping away for a minute, but knowing that you have to come back, like you like, I can't take, even is because here's the thing, the reality, the truth is like, I would love to detach from social media and just like go off the grid and just like
Right.
not do this at all, and just create. But it is one of those things where I just don't really have the luxury of being able to do that. And I'm also like, I worked my ass off just to try to keep up with people like Keiko. It's like
Yeah.
Keiko, like she can't do that at all,
Yeah,
because
she's
like
a
she has
beast,
to
bro.
make it her platform. She is.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy because we especially if you watch like that social media dilemma on Netflix, if you watch that documentary and you think to yourself, I want to detach, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but then I'm thinking to myself, well, if I do that, then there's no way people are going to hear about my podcast. Like they might hear about it through word of mouth, but who knows how long that's going to take. Like and I'm not really worried about it too much, but I'm also thinking to myself like, but I kind of like it though. I kind of like, it's kind of cool to see one of my favorite things about doing this podcast, and I'm sure for you, you get this all the time because of the amount of content you guys put out. But if you can learn something from that individual, and like I had someone reach out to me and I reshared her story because she was listening to the last podcast about how I talk shit about New Year's resolutions and how they're stupid. And she's like, by the way, this is getting me through 2021. Like this totally makes sense to me. And, thanks for putting this content. And she's giving me all this, DM praise. And I'm like, that makes me feel good. This is the reason why I do this, is because if I can hit 1 or 2 people a day, like that's the key. And I think if everyone had that mentality, there's a lot of good that can come from social media, but there's so much more negative than there is positive, right? Like, I mean, the Avengers is better than the Notebook. That's a fact, right? So because the Avengers is badass and there's a lot of action and it's just fun and it's cool. And the Notebook's a good movie, but it's not better than the Avengers. And I think we always think of social media like that, to where there's just so much negative shit on it that we think social media is all negative, but that's only because we're choosing to consume that type of content. Like I was having this debate with a buddy the other day because he's, and we've talked political before. And even though I lean kind of more in the middle than anything, but he's like hardcore conservative to the right. And I always try to have these conversations with him where I'm like, yeah, your Second Amendment, I get you, but you gotta, you kind of know where we're at right now. Like it's different than it was in 1776, right? Like maybe we should change the system. And he's like, no, so we're having this debate. And he's like, yeah, all this content that I see on Facebook and all this bullshit is just, it's talking shit about Trump and it's doing this. And I'm like, well, let me ask you this. The way social media is and YouTube and all these algorithms are, if you do nothing but watch puppy videos and consume puppy
All you see are
content,
puppy videos.
that's all you see is puppy videos, bro. So that's what I told him. And I'm like, so dude, what you're doing right now is the reason you have so many Trump haters is because every time you see something that's anti-Trump, you're talking shit and they're giving you content and you're looking up these articles and you're consuming all this negative content. Like you just got to be careful, man, with how you're consuming that content, because it could be deadly, but it could also be super positive if you want it to be. You just got to follow it.
Like it is kind of like a fascinating thing because, especially with the current climate, the political climate, it's like, I think that we're hyper aware of what's actually going on. But, it's like for years,
Why is there something going on politically?
I mean, like, I think that they're running out of like coffee somewhere.
That's what it is. Yeah. Okay.
That's what but it's like it's like for years, it's like I was always kind of noticing like there was just like a lot more polarity. There was just like a lot more of this like I love it or I hate it. Whereas opposed to like whatever happened to the middle, whatever happened to the gray, where it's like nothing is cut and dry. But because social media is so immediate, and so because of everything is being like so quick, the options really are forcing you to see things in a much more polarized way, where either something is good or something is bad. And I feel like because of that, people, and this goes into I haven't seen the social dilemma, but I'm assuming this would be like something to be talked about with it, where it's just like technology in general, like social media, like a lot of things are forcing us to basically work within this parameter of absolute comfort, like we are not making ourselves uncomfortable, in ways that matter,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's also us to kind of just like, instead of actually taking our time to like process, evaluate, understand, and truly reflect on a scenario, we are so quick to like just regram something that's controversial or interesting. And this is where a lot of like the, like,
With no research behind it, by the way, we just press a button and think it's right,
well, I mean,
which is
like,
crazy.
yeah, 100%. But
Yeah.
even like more to the point where it's just like, I have so many friends that will like take something, they will reshare something because in the moment it feels very relevant, and then all of a sudden, like I will look at that and be like, you do realize that like this was a post that's not happening right now. Like this is actually happening from like, 7 years ago
But
or
they
something
didn't
else.
know because they just regrammed it.
They didn't know, or even like, I
Crazy.
had some people that, and it's like, me, like I am a Democrat. So if people listening to this, like you can love it or hate it, it's like, but I am also, I feel like more centrist, like I am not a person that hates Republicans. I don't hate anybody. But what I do feel is that in the current climate, we are not experiencing Republicans or Democrats. We're experiencing a lot more kind of like far left, far right,
Hmm.
especially and again, like you even said, it kind of comes down to perspective, where it's like if all you are focusing on is Facebook, Fox News, and things like that, you really are only actually seeing that
That side.
Antifa,
Yeah.
Antifa and Black Lives Matter are just like burning the world down, and especially with the development of like 4chan and 8chan and kind of like the QAnon things, like it truly is one of those things where like I feel like I'm a crazy person, you know, because like when I see things like the events that took place just the other day, where our nation's capital, spelled with an O, by the way, just for a lot of people that like, like forget
In case
about
we
this,
need.
but
Yeah.
it's like when our nation's capital was attacked, you know, by the provocation, and it's like you can split hairs all you want, but at the end of the day, I've watched the videos, and there's no denying that it's like there was antagonistic behavior by Trump, by Rudy Giuliani, by a lot of the other Republicans that are like hard, and like I don't even call them Republicans anymore. They're just fucking they're the MAGA universe. It's like when you
Right.
are that far removed, this is where things get really confusing and sad. And it's like, I have a lot of friends that are like, watch the GOP burn down, and like that's great. And I'm like, no, that's not great. I believe in checks and balances. I believe should be, another side, or at least like another faction that is able to actually keep balance to things. But it is one of those things where I'm just like, this is so pathetic though, when that actual party can't even control itself, and now it's to the point where the bull on like charging bull is basically like attacking his own people. The vice
Yeah.
president, like Lindsey Graham just got like harassed and nearly attacked at an airport, and it's just like these things are like, I don't like Lindsey Graham. I don't like Pence personally, but it's one of those things where I feel like it's kind of sad and pathetic that it's like these people who like hours ago were seen as like revolutionary, and like the leaders of that particular party
Yeah.
are viewed as being like horrible now. And the thing that's really upsetting me most about it is that I just kind of feel like it's based now more about your clout, like about like, and maybe it was you and me, or it was somebody else I was talking to, but like, you know, when everything was happening, especially at that airport, like people are shouting, but every single person had their phone and they're just filming it so that they
Oh
can
yeah.
regrab it. Everybody that broke into the Capitol, like they got fucked. Okay, like they are about to get so arrested, and whether they are going to get like federally prosecuted or at least whatever. You had thousands of cell phones recording who is going into the Capitol on top of the actual cameras, that are in these places. And it's like people have, they're not even thinking beyond that moment. And this is the danger that I feel like we're in right now, where it kind of
Hmm.
comes full circle back to that element where it's just like it's black or white, it's like it's left or right party,
Yeah.
and
Well,
like denial is just unprecedented. Like there's a lot of unprecedented that's happening right now.
Bro.
Every
And
fucking day.
dude, yeah, so many good points there. A lot of good nuggets, and that's the danger that I've always had with because I touch base on political here and there and every now and then, but the one thing I always stay true to and have ever since I was able to vote is I've gone back and forth from voting Democrat and Republican, and lately, probably in the last like 6-7 years, I would say I'm extremely passionate about the fact that, and we've talked about this before, that the two-party system is just, it's so funky now because, with social media, there is so much more. When we were kids, all we did was we watched CNN and we watched Fox, and we didn't really think anything else of it. But now, because the political system has grown to this, massive government, corrupt lobbyist money, billionaires donating to certain factions, and it's become this like bubble of just shitty folk on both sides, that now we only have two outlets to listen to, and that's like the Fox and the CNN, however you want to say it. When we're on that team, so if you're team red, team Fox, and someone on CNN says something, that means everything on CNN to you is bullshit. And that to me is like so crazy that we've let ourselves as a species get to this, to where it's so dangerous. And I hate to kind of relate it to religion a little bit, because no matter how, whoever's listening to this, no matter where you see on the other side of it, but I've preached that I'm more of a agnostic and not necessarily atheist, because I just don't know, right? So I'm just very I'm curious. I would say I'm very curious about what's out there, and I know we're not alone, and I know there might be a higher power, but I just don't think there's proof out there. Faith is extremely important, and there's a lot of great things about religion, but there's also a lot of crazy things about religion too, right? If you're a Buddhist, that you don't believe in Christianity, that Buddhism is stupid, that's the same type of problem that we're having with politics, that we have with religion. Like, you have to be able to accept that there is other religions out there, and your religion might be made up and stupid. We always make fun of Scientologists, but is it that crazy? Is it more crazier than a guy coming back from the dead? Like, really? Come on. So it's like we're stuck on this like weird side where if you're right, you can't listen to the left and vice versa. But what if there is some things on that side that might be true and could help humanity down the long run? And it's just so weird that people don't have that critical thinking, the ability to think objectively when it comes to that type of stuff.
And I feel like that actually, like, that last part is the most important element to a lot of what's been happening, where it's like, when it comes to the two-party system that we essentially have, because there are independents, but at the end of the day, like, we are a democratic or republican society,
Yeah.
and the thing that I've learned, because I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, I also won't say that I've always been the most political person, but like, I feel like over the last, like, 8-12 years and stuff, like, I've progressively learned and forced myself to learn more. And it's one of those things where, like, now it's like, if you don't feel like you have an opinion, or if you're not willing to express an opinion, like, I feel like there's almost no excuse for that, because it's like you have to catch up. Otherwise, at this point, like, you are going to be so far behind. But the thing that I was trying to get at is that, like, you had mentioned how just people in general just don't do enough critical thinking. And yes, that is so applicable when it comes to religion, but in politics. But I think in general, just people in general right now are not willing to actually invest the time for a lot of things, to actually take a moment, like I'd even said earlier, take a moment, process, digest what's actually happening, and also just enjoy it. I feel like that's something that's almost like a luxury that, like, I've kind of maintained, or I inherited from, like, an older generation,
Yeah.
of being able to just, like, enjoy a moment, digest it, whereas people are just kind of filming things, and then they don't really embrace it. There is something truly scary about the idea of, like, right now, with what's happening over the last 4 years, because this was not happening anywhere near as before Trump got in there and started saying, false news. Because you know what? It's like, forever, we've always had different kind of perspectives on things. It's like,
Right.
some people might think that abortion is terrible, and at the end of the day, it's like, it's not that simple. There are so many nuances to these polarizing decisions that each party has,
Right.
but it is one of those things where it wasn't until somebody came in and said, 2 + 2 is 5. And then all of a sudden people started to buy that. And then that's where things are now getting really scary
Yep.
and confusing, because it's like, it's not like it was when you and I were kids and my dad would watch Fox News, because at the end of the day, it was still the news. And,
Right. We still listen to it. Yeah.
it was very biased. It's like,
Mhm.
there was definitely bias. There, like,
Well, now
nowadays,
we know it. Like us humans know. Like if someone asks you, "Hey, did you see that train wreck on the news?" "Oh yeah, that was crazy. That happened." "Yeah, what news station do you watch?" "Fox." "Oh, we're not friends anymore, bro." Like automatically, like we're consciously now aware that Fox equals right and CNN equals, which is crazy.
it
The
is crazy.
fact that
Yeah, I feel like it's always worth having a discussion, but what is
Right.
wild about it is the fact that it's just like, nowadays it is one of those things where it is not so crazy to think that like the one news source for the right is not only telling a totally different story, but that these people are also, because they are telling it, they're also believing. I mean, like, I was having a conversation with Keiko about this because obviously everything is happening. Like, there's a lot of discussion about politics going. And the thing that truly just blows my mind is that like our political beliefs are no longer governed by logic or by current events, but they are governed by conspiracy theories from QAnon. They're
Mhm.
governed by, like Twitter and Facebook and what you heard from some dude that read a thing on 4chan or 8chan, and it
Or,
is one of
or
those
or
things
a
where,
random guy at Buffalo Wild Wings that you met having a beer with, and he said something, and you believed it right away without any proper research. Like
yeah,
it's
and so like that's the thing that just kills me, is that it's like, I have no problem with taking the time to listen to somebody, and again, like, listen to somebody on the right, and actually try to, because again, like, you and I have had this conversation. You are slightly more right center. I'm more left center. I don't think any less of you, and at the same time, I have friends that are far right, and I still am willing to try to take the time to listen to them and explain and be like, take a minute and actually process this for a minute, okay? What is actually happening where tens of thousands of people like throwing MAGA flags and red hats that say "Make America Great Again," bum rush the Capitol, break through the walls, 5 people died, the insane amount of racial bias where like these people got through, where nobody was
supposed to be
actually
the
shot.
most secure, one of the most secure buildings in the country.
Secure bettings in the entire world,
Right.
and like one woman was shot that I'm aware of. She was shot, like, I believe, in the neck, and because she was literally trying to break through the window to get into the actual chambers. But then again, and like, I think at the time, maybe like 40 or 50 people had been arrested total so far. But it's like, back in the summer, Black Lives Matter. Yeah, there were some really terrible examples of fires going up and vandalism and things, and it was horrible with some of these situations that happened. But at the end of the day, circumstances were also very, very different. The way that these rallies were treated were very different. And for people listening to this, if this is triggering for you, just please keep in mind that, like, I was living in New York City when this was happening, a block away from like basically Black Lives Matter rallies that I attended as on a regular basis,
Mhm.
for most of the summer. I saw a lot of this stuff happening, and I mean, like, the fact that we can actually blindly just and say, no, this is false, because right now I'm also seeing tons of things from people saying that they truly believe that the people that bum rushed the Capitol, they were not like far right MAGA enthusiasts. They were actually Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And it's one of those things where like there were like 5 black people in the entire like mall. Like, I
Right.
don't know where you guys are coming from.
Yeah.
If that, not that that has to be a thing, but it's just one of those things. So it's like the denial that people have in this country right now
Mhm.
is what I think is one of the most baffling and scary things, because it's like
Yeah.
it goes back to that 2 + 2 = 5, where it's just like, if you can't believe what's actually in front of your face, and also accept the fact that it's like every single person, court, appointed person as well, like, that have gone through the motions to give the benefit of the doubt. I mean, even fucking Mitch McConnell, gave Trump the benefit of the doubt and slowed everything down and did not want Biden to win. even he came out and he was just like, this is one of the most important votes that I'm ever going to give. And I truly do believe, even though he said, I did not want Biden to win. I did not want him to become the president, but I gave, like this a fair shot. I wanted to see the results, and he won, and
And that's it.
unequivocally.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
And and this is the problem where I think, and I talked about on my last podcast, where I think 2021 is going to become even more scarier because, and I hope it doesn't, but I'm just more of a realist than anything because I don't see people changing over the course of, especially what's happened. And I think a lot of that has to do with, to your point about, the news where, yeah, there's always been bias, but now more than ever, each news channel and each network is so desperate because they're in a dying industry. Let's be honest. Like, you and I don't learn how to create content or do podcasts watching CNN or Fox. Like, we watch YouTube or we listen to podcasts. Like, the news industry is not what it was 10 years ago. So they're desperate to keep onto those networks. So have we caught both networks in lies before? Of course. And that's going to continue to happen. But I think that's a big part of it too, to where no matter what side you're leaning on, you are seeing irregularities in the opposing news station. The issue becomes when you're not watching the opposing news station and you're watching your station that you love and trust, you can't accept the lies. And that's the problem, is there's going to be lies on both sides of the fence. It's when we can actually think to ourselves, okay, listen, there's bullshit on both sides, and you could stand in the middle and say, I like something on this side, I like something on this side, I'm going to form my own opinion as a human and not worry about something else. That's how you don't get those far left and far right folks. They're so hooked on that certain side, and they don't want to listen to another side. And this is where we get the radicalism. And it seems definitely has gotten worse with Trump. The one thing I do appreciate Trump for, and I'm glad he was voted the president, and I did vote for him only because I thought I was going to go a different way, of course. But the reason I voted for him is the same reason I would support Bernie Sanders. It's because I think he's damaging to the government. And I think the government needs a little reality check and needs to know that the people are in control. And
then he actually damaged the government.
Right.
which you weren't wrong.
I wasn't wrong. So I kind of knew that was going to happen. I didn't think it was going to happen the way it did, but
everybody knew it was going to happen. That's and going back to it, like, that's actually what made the whole scenario so wild that it even got that far, is that people are playing dumb and they're just like, I don't even understand how this happened, or how did these people get through? And it's just like, I don't know who you were talking. I was just like, I've been anticipating this for fucking years. Like,
well, and again, the one thing I appreciated about him is he didn't change. I mean, he's been the same dick that he was, 20 years ago. Like, nothing has changed. The same people that voted for him should understand that, this is the guy you voted for, and he just wasn't fit to be president. He, if maybe he kept his mouth shut and didn't tweet because his policies were, I believed in a lot of the policies, but that necessarily wasn't his idea. Remember, this is the Republican side, and this is how we come to, and this is like my big issue with government, is the fact that we can only choose between two of those sides is maddening to me. I just can't. And even though I believe in a lot of, the Democratic policies that are put in place, the fact that they pushed aside, Tulsi Gabbard, which I really wanted to win, or Bernie, some of those folks I would have voted for over Trump, but the fact that they got pushed aside to elect Biden, and who knows, Biden might do a great job. But it's almost like you have so many great candidates on that side, and they've done this every single time there's an election. It just makes me think that it's gotten to the point where it's so corrupt. There's just not a lot of thought process behind it, a lot of old folks that don't understand. You could easily, if we just tomorrow said to ourselves, hey, listen, I believe in Republican stuff, I believe in Democratic stuff, let's form our own little party. The independent party could actually be pretty strong, but people have no faith in that for some reason. It's very strange to me.
I think the one thing that a lot of people, hopefully moving forward, will also take more consideration for it, is the fact that, at the end of the day, it is kind of interesting and strange that, I mean, again, before Trump came in and like we had daily, I'm kind of with you in the sense where it's just like, it's going to be strange going in for another 4 years or more where we don't have some fantastic kind of like Easter egg of like what's going to happen today, because it's like, he doesn't make press announcements. He fires people on Twitter, or he decides that he's going to antagonize like the leader of wherever,
Right.
and in all caps and say, I'm gonna like, I will bomb you, like things like this. Like it was kind of terrifying and exciting at the same time because it's like you just never knew what you were gonna get with this guy. But I
Yeah.
think the thing that a lot of people forget about is that in a normal American society, like the president does have power and quite a bit of power. The real change comes on a state level. A lot of the problems that people have with like their state or like where their city even and stuff like
Local
people
government.
forget about.
Yeah.
Yeah, people forget about the fact that it's just like that. Like, and this was a prime example in Georgia, actually. Whereas, like, if you
Yeah.
actually look at the numbers from like the Georgia election, in November, you know, um, Ossoff and Warnock weren't necessarily. I mean, at least like Ossoff in particular was not winning. Like he was actually like pretty far behind. Warnock, I think, was like pretty touch even, but with the but Biden, like he crushed it in Georgia. And before people go crazy, it's like this particular state, especially, was recounted more times than any place should ever have to count votes. There were paper votes. There is no conspiracy. Like I don't know who listens to your stuff, but I want to make this abundantly clear that like there is no conspiracy. Georgia is fine. Okay, so going back, okay, Georgia, Biden crushed it, right? And then it's like but Warnock and Ossoff, like they weren't necessarily going to win, and it's one of those things where I think a lot of people, what happened was they didn't want to vote for Trump as president, right? They wanted to vote for somebody else, and they voted for Biden. But then they either didn't actually, because here's the thing, like truly, like most Americans, I think when they were filling out a ballot, they know the presidents that are up for option, the vice
Mm-hmm.
presidents are up for option because that's where all the money goes to shine, put them out. And then all of a sudden you've got like 16, 20 boxes that you have to like, who is this person? Do what
Right.
is, like, you might not know if you don't really do the research.
Everyone probably Christmas treated it if you did a mail-in ballot.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
you probably just guessed.
or they just didn't fill in other people. Whereas the one thing that is very, very true about the Republican Party is that like very loyal. It's like the Republican Party will constantly go through and they will back their party, they will back their plans. And sometimes, like in this case right now, to a fault. They're happening right now that are unethical, that are 100% like cusping on illegality, issues. And like that party is ride or die, and that is a very
Right.
powerful force. But with that said, it's just like it kind of goes to show you that it's just like people are not thinking about local government. They're not thinking about their state. When it comes to where the power comes from, they think it's all comes from the president and then
Right.
trickles down to that. And I
There's
think
so
if more
many.
people actually,
Yeah.
because there are independent, like governors and people in the
Yeah.
Senate and like party members that I think actually could help to facilitate change in the ways that we need.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and
I don't know.
that's a great point because that's kind of the issue, right? Is like people. That's why I'm so shocked. We were talking about two teams before, blue and red, right? But people don't understand. If you're storming the Capitol and Trump wins, okay, great. Guess what? If he puts out a press announcement tomorrow and says everyone wear a mask, everyone be home in quarantine, if you live in Texas, you could do whatever the fuck you want with no legal ramifications at all, because it's not up to the president what each state does. And that's
Exactly.
what's so interesting about it is we're so committed to one dude or one gal, and we're
Okay.
honed in. But yet these same clowns that storm the Capitol, or these same folks that talk shit about CNN or talk shit about Fox, these are the same idiots that don't vote for their governor or their mayor. They're not the ones that are going out there supporting local government around your city and your community. And this is the reason why we're in the situation we're in, because, like we said, people aren't using critical thinking and they're not educating themselves on how policies work. They're just watching Facebook and watching the news, and they like the excitement, right? That's why I said it's like the Avengers. They like that action. They want the bullshit. They don't want to deal with local government because things are going to get done and things are going to be peaceful and we're going to have a great community. They don't want that. People want madness. They want craziness. No one wants to watch The Notebook. That's idiotic. They want to watch the Avengers. But we got to change our mindset a little bit on those type of things, I think.
Yeah, I'd actually shared a podcast with you, or from Malcolm Gladwell, because when we were talking
I
about
really enjoyed that so much. Yeah.
And so for anybody listening, Malcolm Gladwell, amazing, like a journalist, but he has an amazing podcast called Revisionist History. He has like these concepts that he likes to like deeper dive and explore. And there's this one particular episode talking about alternative methods of government, or governing, and how like typically in the reference example was using a high school, in I think it was South America, like somewhere like in Chile or something,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
like when it came to electing their class president, for this school, it was not done in the traditional way that you and I would actually think of, where it's like, you put your name in, you kind of like walk around the school, you try to promote yourself like a regular election, and then you actually have people vote and try to say like, you're the best, and that person wins. They get free pizza or something, it was actually based entirely on an arbitrary system that was based on like a lottery where, people would put in, and like the way that was eventually whittled down was that, like you have to qualify to almost like a finals, like a
Right.
tournament style finals, where if you are in some ways where whether it's education or experience or things like this, like there's a parameter that you have to meet, and then you are entered into a lottery. And if you are selected based off of that, then you win, and it's fair, it's unbiased. And the thing that they actually found is that like when I first heard it, I was just like, that's almost scary. But then when they actually started to explain it and explain the psychology behind it and just like the nuances of how that worked, I don't necessarily think that it would actually work for a president or something like this per se, but it is really a fascinating concept because what they actually found through the years of doing this, studying it, and actually pulling it out of just schools and then adopting it into like larger universities and things like this, they actually found that the people that constantly were seen as the least likely to be successful at a position like governing a body of students or leading a people were almost always the people that were introverted, that might not like be more willing to actually step up or say something, because these are the people that weren't very comfortable with parading themselves and championing themselves and stuff. But it turned out that when it actually came time to create plans and delegate and invoke change, those people actually turned out to be incredible leaders, because they were not only able to be like, they were able to be bipartisan, like across like any of the ideas, but then they were also better equipped in this kind of like hodgepodge of other people that were elected. That group is able to basically like kind of come to a common ground for things, because it's like there were some people that might have an extreme idea. They wouldn't necessarily win in one way, but all of a sudden when they're all having to work together and to kind of like make things communal, they found this common ground that most politicians and then most occasions don't find, because we're all so selfishly thinking about just a rather
Yeah.
than what the party is trying to work for,
Yeah.
which
Like
is
like most of them have an agenda. Like,
yeah.
like you could,
I mean, fucking Ted Cruz, and I mean, like, come on, that guy is like, he's saying every single thing that you can possibly say right now to be a total dick, but he's only saying this stuff because he wants to run for president, and it's just
that's
like,
one reason.
I don't
Yeah.
like, I think there's so many people that like truly don't feel what they feel right now, but listening to this, I'm just like, you are 100% just waiting to like ride this wave and run from. Sorry, that's a
That-
huge rant. But yes, 100%.
You're 100% right though, because again, I think that's the reason why, that's why I really enjoyed that podcast, because the one thing I appreciated the most is I related a lot of this to like our country and just kind of envisioning how that could happen, because it would be difficult as president just because there is so much behind the scenes money and bullshit that we'll never know about. But imagine how many US citizens, normal folk that are passionate about helping their community, that want to do good, but the only reason we don't pursue politics is because we know a majority of it is bullshit, and a lot of it is just peacocking, and things don't get done in Washington. In fact, when things are kind of squirrely, like if you and I were to get into an argument right now in public, and we were to talk about, I don't know, kettlebells, I'm just throwing it out there. If we were talking about kettlebells and you and I disagreed on something, one of our friends wouldn't get involved and they'd be like, yeah, dude, I don't want to get in those politics. Like, there's actually the word of an argument, the word that we use for an argument or disagreement, we call that, I don't want to get involved in politics. So that just
Yeah.
goes to show you that politics is so crazy. But that's what I loved about that podcast, is explaining that. I think they even called it the voter lottery, right? Like if someone wants to
Yeah.
Google it,
Mhm.
it's the
Yeah.
voter lottery, because it's random and it's regular folk that didn't really want to get into it, but when you get forced into it, almost like a draft,
Yeah.
you
But
know, like the military
it's like
draft.
these are the same people that are more than qualified in almost
Sure.
every other way, and it bypasses all of that peacocking. It makes it so that, like, the people that are actually voting, there is no necessary vote. It's not like people are, because this is the problem that I do feel with a lot of, and this is why I think a lot of people didn't like Biden, especially because it's like Biden in all cases is a very vanilla, like presidential choice, especially when it came against like Bernie Sanders or somebody else. And then you've got Trump, who is literally orange. He is as flamboyant and as antagonistic as they can be. And it's like, kind of like you even said, like, that was one of the charming things that, like, you were just like, I like this guy because he catches my attention and
Mhm.
he's provocative, But it is one of those things where, again, going back in that particular episode as well, and just like psychological studies that they've done over the last several years because of everything that's happened, they've actually come to find that it's just like those are some of the worst people that you could actually want to vote for or to
Yeah.
have lead, because it is not about their experience or their intentions. It's about how provocative and how interesting they can be. And it's like, I think that that's also one of the things where it's like they always kind of refer back to like uneducated people and stuff like that are like voting, mostly like uneducated white folk and stuff that are on the right. And it
Mhm.
is one of those things where it's like, at the end of the day, when you are kind of like an antagonistic, and very, and I keep saying provocative because it's like, it really is just the most perfect word for like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He just provocates. And it's just like, when you are that person, he doesn't understand the politics that he's supposed to be leading. Truly, I don't think he does. He's a terrible politician. He might
Yeah.
be decent with money. He might be decent with some business. Like
It's a big
that is one
job
thing
though,
that I
man.
truly, it's a big job. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's one thing I truly will say, like, I don't know much about like the economic side of what's been happening. So I'm not going to even try to dance in that. But it is one of those things where it's like, when you're trying to reach, the everyman, even though the vast majority of people like truly would benefit from a Democratic Party and like their policies and the tax reforms and things like this, like, we oftentimes are fed a very different story. If you actually take the time to understand and really look at the Democratic policies, most people, and this is across the board almost unanimously, most people that are the uneducated white male that are like voting for Donald Trump or something like this, the same people that are rioting and like attacking the citadel of America, they're the same
Totally.
people that like don't understand this stuff, because it's like they're not thinking about politics. They don't care about your agenda. They just like provocative, and
Yeah.
that is kind of the issue, going back for the full circle element versus like, if we weren't trying to choose the brightest color as opposed to
Right.
like the best color, it might
Right.
be.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's, again, I say the reason I voted for him before was because I wanted him to disrupt the government. And the one thing I like about it that did happen, and there's a lot of shitty stuff that happened in the last 4 years, nothing personal that affected me, thank goodness. But I think a lot of that has to do with what we talked about, which is the president. You have to do a lot of things wrong for your daily life to be affected by the president. That's just a fact. I mean, a lot of things wrong. I mean, even little things like, I mean, just to put an example out there, like EBT stamps,
Mhm.
right? Like even something like that, even that decision right there isn't up to the president. Like there's so many things that are involved to give you a tax break and to affect you. I mean, if you live in a poor part of the community, there's a lot of things you could do locally to make that community better. And I think the reason I enjoyed watching what happened the first year in particular that he was president was because I knew that this was going to be the downfall, and people are going to realize that. I look around, yes, there's a lot of shit happening in Washington, and yes, there's a lot of craziness going on and a lot of negativity, and that's all horrible, but my daily life hasn't changed that much. And hopefully a lot of people will think to themselves, all we really need in that seat is a positive human being someone that represents our country the right way. And you and I, as individual people, have to do the right things on a daily basis with our community, our family, our job. We got to do the right things. And then once we do the right things, everything else happens. There's not a whole lot that individual is going to do except for represent our country the right way. Donald Trump did not do that. Now more than ever, I need to be on my game personally, because the president, this is the worst we're going to get, hopefully. We've seen the worst side. So now hopefully it'll wake a lot of people up and say, I got to get my shit together. I got to focus on me, and I got to focus on my community, because it looks like the president, it's possible for 4 years that the president isn't going to do a whole lot. We've seen that happen. So
yeah, I do think the other element to really kind of consider as well is that, like, I feel like, again, like if you're able to actually take the last 4 years and reflect on everything and stuff, you know, and whether this is a triggering subject for somebody or not, I think it's important to put it out there, where it's like, if you are able to go through the process, and this is no way, I'm not trying to attack anybody or you or anything like this, but, you know, you and I do have a very different ability of being able to kind of say, yes, we can actually vote on this person, because in a general day, he might not, you know, he could fuck this up a lot and barely affect us in person. And I feel like because of that, you know, and we've all heard this used as a term, but it's like, it's very true. We are very privileged in the fact that we are able to actually have an opinion that's based around that. And that's whether it's a third world country, that's whether just the fact that we are like white, you know.
for sure.
And, you know, I'm not trying to pull this into any kind of particular like racial element of things and stuff, but it is very much based around that fact. We can very much be comfortable with that idea. Whereas the people that
100%.
are on food stamps, you know, it's like people that are on food stamps, you know, it's a lot more complicated, I think, than either of us will ever fully understand. But it is one of those things where it's like, yes, some people truly do just make really fucked up, stupid decisions that ruin their life, and then they end up in bad scenarios, and that affects other people and it snowballs. And yes, there are tons of people that, you know, could be working to benefit and work for their communities more, and a lot of them do. You know, these communities are oftentimes kind of, it's called systemic, you know, for a reason, because systematically there are things in place that are basically like forcing these communities to not thrive, not benefit, and not actually catch up. And so there is no one quick way. There is no real answer that fix everything. The recognition that I feel like this whole last year was bringing with the Black Lives Matter movement and things like this. And again, you know, especially like I lived in New York City. It's not like I'm trying to say that makes me more woke than some other person, but it is one of those things where it does make you kind of like aware of the fact that it's like change can happen, but it doesn't mean that it needs to be more white or more gentrified. We do need to be able to have assistance for certain communities. And at the end of the day, the tax benefits and breaks and things like this that we've been talking about, like the people that are going to be penalized are the people that, or at least like that should be like taxed more heavily, are the people that have for decades, like had any affection or had that affected them. And so it is going to be one of those things where if it's done properly, we should hopefully be able to rise the tide, rise the boats for people, so that in that sense, it's just kind of leveling the playing field, because nobody should be on food stamps. And it's not like you fucking wake up and choose that.
For sure. And, you know, that's the frustrating part. And that's why I bring that up, is because, you know, the reason that exists and the reason why those, you know, poor communities exist, because I'm team human. Like, I think, you know, if you got a horrible hand dealt to you, there's not a whole lot you could do. And, you know, I think, it's tough. I mean, there's not a whole lot, and we are privileged. 100% we're privileged. Just by me being male, I'm privileged. And I don't think a lot of people admit that enough, but, you know, again, doesn't mean I work or don't work as hard, whatever. I think a lot of it has to do with when we realize that the reason there is poor communities still to the day, and the reason why there is this systemic racism that's going on, and the reason why I love the movement that happened, because I think that, again, very similar to Donald Trump, it was that extremist. And I love the fact that movement happened, because it woke up a lot of people, including myself, to where I looked around and I said, if I'm more like my first stimulus check, I donated that. I didn't even take it because I don't need it. And that's the problem I feel like with government, which is the reason we're in this situation to where there is poor communities out there, is because of our government. We could clean it up in a second. You know, we've been in this huge trend for the past like 12 to 14 years to think that we can be high and mighty and go help other worlds, or excuse me, other countries in the world. And we don't even help Michigan. You know, we don't.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
it's,
like, this year in particular, like I'm still even just trying to fathom like how we actually have money. Like it almost makes you realize like how
We made it.
immaterial money is. Yeah, like,
We
like,
made
it's
it.
just how
we made it.
like
And that's what's so annoying to me, is because you can get any president you want in there in the White House, and he could say, hey, let's make $5 trillion, and every single family that makes $30,000 or less, let's only send it to them. They could totally do that tomorrow in a heartbeat, but they choose not to. Why? Because they want to separate us, because where there's diversity, there's sides, and where there's sides, there's left and right. And they could go with these policies. And that's what's the most frustrating part. That's why I say, as much as I believe in voting, because it's all we have right now, if you wake up and you're less privileged than someone else, the only thing you could do is try to help your community. Like Dave Chappelle said something great, which I don't know if you watched his stand-up. He kind of like did this mini documentary, and the one thing he said that really resonated, that I think a lot of people should think about, is if you wake up every day and you want to change the world, it's not going to happen, but you can change the block.
Yeah,
Which I thought
and
is so powerful.
that goes back. That even goes back to the whole kind of like presidential versus like local government thing. It's just like we need to stop thinking about everything, because it also translates as well to like our accomplishments. You know, it's just like a lot of people are like, well, I can't do it because it's such a big idea. It's like nothing is done in one shot. You take little chunks of things, you know, and it's very much the same kind of like translation when it comes to even like big government, small government. Like the small government is where we really need to be focusing, you know. But
Exactly.
even going back to that, it's like one thing I think is really confusing. Well, I'm sure a lot of people do think about it, but it's like, you know, most people aren't talking about it, is the fact that it's like when you've got like a blanket stimulus check, like for example, there are a lot of people that I think it was $1,200, you know,
Right.
like the first one, you know, that was huge for a lot of people, especially let's say like Midwest, you know, and stuff like that. That check came through, that saved them for weeks or months. $1,200, that New York City, like that didn't help me at all.
At all.
And
Yeah.
that's not necessarily the government's fault or anything like this, but it's one of those things where I feel like it's so arbitrary to kind of come up with a certain figure and say that that's fair for universally across the United States, because it's like if you live in, like I chose to live in New York City, you know, that's fine, you know, but it's like the amount of like what, like when they're saying now like 600, like $600 in New York City, that's a fucking joke, you know. $600 down here in Florida, that's crazy, you know. It's like that's food for weeks. And so it's one of those things for like, we need to be able to, I don't have an answer for that. And I feel like a lot of people are kind of in the same boat, because that is such we've never had a situation like this.
Right. Well, and the fact that it's not, and that's the frustrating part, right? Is like the fact that it's not talked about more is super interesting to me. It makes me think either A, there's so many opinions in government that they can't agree on anything. So they almost like take, like maybe like one dude was like, yeah, we should give every single person $5,000. And the other person was like, no, give them 200. And they're like, let's just meet in the middle. Let's do 1,200. Like, I feel like either A, that happened, or B, they just don't give a shit. And there can't be any math behind it, because money's made up. The reason New York is expensive is because it's a popular city. Same thing with LA and California. Who decided that New York is supposed to be expensive?
Yeah.
Like, it's because the market's calling for it. So I love the idea of, was Andrew Wang? Is it Wang or Yang? I don't know if you followed him. He never made it to the primaries or anything like that, obviously. But one of his policies I really enjoyed was giving a tax break to each city. So like you would have the Verizon bridge. Instead of the George Washington bridge, it'd be the Verizon bridge.
Oh, yeah.
So now that company is giving billions of dollars to the city. Right, exactly. And the company's giving billions of dollars to the city, and now they could take those tax breaks and they could take that and put it to the poor in the community. Like, that was one of his big initiatives. And that to me is like, that's a great idea. And it's so
common. It affects nobody.
Right, it affects nobody.
Unless you're super invested in having a bridge named George Washington or Kosciuszko or something else, and like you like Brooklyn Bridge, you know, it's like, but it's like that's just. And here's the thing: it's like I feel like the reason why that was like probably not worked out is because there are some people that are extremely against the idea of having that kind of like capitalist control. Well, that company shouldn't have that much money. And at the end of the day, this kind of comes back to the centrist attitude of things, where I'm just like, do you see how beneficial that could be for the actual people that really need it versus like the people that are going to be like
Yeah.
gridlocked and stuck for fucking years because they just don't get the extra income. Even that,
Yeah.
like, still, it could be like $10 billion that they could put toward the bridge just for that thing, and it still would be like a drop in the bucket for how much help that people need.
Yeah, and there's so many other topics like healthcare and things like that. It's just there's a lot of different ways to do things, but I think, a lot of people in government are just so stuck on one specific way, and there's not enough people challenging ideas. Like what the Black Lives Matter did, it definitely changed the perception of a lot of people, police stations to cities to mayors to businesses. It changed perception a lot. So it goes to show you how a group of people can really make a massive impact. And, the people that storm the Capitol, we keep talking about that, but it's funny that those group of people aren't smart enough to think to themselves, wait a minute, let's form a peaceful movement and kind of create like an idea that we could pitch to the government to help our community. But instead we think violence is always the answer. And that's the hard part. And as I got older, I've started to realize and use that part of my brain, the critical thinking part, because I know I didn't use it like 10 years ago. It's funny how as I get older, there are different ways to handle things, but we can't do it by just sitting on our ass and using the keyboard and talking shit. Like you got to come up with some ideas and make some action.
The problem is that, like, at that march, I promise you, as much as I am against like the whole MAGA crowd and stuff like that, like I promise you there were thousands of people that were there to be peaceful, that were just kind of like middle-aged people and to see something exciting, and like
Yeah.
have a reason to support something that they honestly believe. Because like I understand, because like there's a lot of that from the same side on the left as well, where it's like you want to passionately believe in something so much that it just fills you up, but what's unfortunate is that it's like, it would be irresponsible for me to just say that like the right is this antagonistic and extremely violent side. That's not how it is. That's not true, but the far right, just as the far left, have tendencies to push it a little far, and especially when it kind of comes to like when it's really widely known. I mean, like there was somebody there from the FBI that was on the news like the same day that the mob kind of got together, and they were going through and able to actually target over 6 or 7 different white supremacist organizations openly, like very much in the front. And the thing is that it's like when you have somebody that's inciting as much, I mean, like bold-faced arguments, just saying like, we need to attack, we need to fight back, we need to be strong and take this. You're sending these people out there. It is kind of like irresponsible to think that, like nothing's gonna happen, let alone doing it for weeks and weeks at a time. But it's
For
like,
sure.
I truly do feel kind of bad because like there are a lot of people that are on the right that I disagree with wholeheartedly, but I don't think all of them are terrible, horrible idiots. But I do think that when they get far enough on the right, and a lot of the people that were there are just far enough, like that
Oh, yeah.
they're outside of logic, and
Right.
then you've got like these groups of people that are like purely there just to fucking cause anarchy. Like
Hmm.
that is where it puts a bad taste for a lot of people and a bad spin. And it's like this could have been prevented
Right.
simply in the same way that you and I were talking privately, like another time before, where it's like the coronavirus thing could have easily been less of an issue if things had been addressed earlier on. If the president had simply worn a mask when it was advised that people do that, instead of making fun of people
Hmm.
for wearing masks. Like if certain actions had been done as an adult, as like a fucking adult, let
As a
alone like the
human
leader,
adult. Yeah.
even adult, let alone the leader of like the free world. Okay,
Right.
like if these simple things had been done, I truly don't think that Trump would have been like the terrible as he is, because guess what? He's literally like there are papers being drawn right now for a second impeachment, that is like going in the works that they're trying to expedite. And guess what? Like you have to be really fucking stupid to be like impeached twice, because that's never happened.
Never.
in history.
And in fact,
You know?
there's only a couple times that's when like crimes were committed. You know, Clinton was one.
Clinton got caught lying, under oath
Right.
because he got a BJ. It's
Yeah,
like, which
exactly.
is again so stupid and so terrible. Okay, I get that, but it's like so vastly different. Like he's more like Nixon, where it's just like he's caught fucking crimes and he's getting away, and it's like he'll barely get a slap in the wrist, federally. It's like I think truly when this is done, like New York is gunning for him, and they are going to take him to the cleaners.
Yeah, New York. I mean, and I love that city, and I know obviously as long as you guys have been there, I'm sure. Politics aside, I mean, the local business thing's kind of irritating. I've been posting about it all the time because I love what like the Barstool Fund is doing, and there's a lot of other great charities out there that are helping. But the Barstool Fund has I think they raised almost $21 million, and they've only been I think 2 or 3 weeks in business. So the Barstool Fund obviously is, barstool.com, but that fund has raised it for local businesses all over the country. The fact that we can't do that per city, like New York is just sitting there literally letting the city, same thing with LA, just letting it kind of dissolve into this like ghost town. I mean, what's your thought process behind how that's being handled? Because that's got to irritate you a little bit, I'm sure. I know you know a lot of local folks down there, or up there.
So I mean, it would be absolutely irresponsible for me to say that like New York wasn't hit hard, and it's not like being greatly affected by what's happened, But at the same time, I do think that what people are also not really speaking about is candidly, is it's really easy to say, oh, New York's a ghost town, it's getting hit really hard, and it's a shame. It's not the same city as other places. You have 50 times the people per capita, of any other major city. There are more people in New York City than there are in some states. I mean, like the country of Ireland has fewer people than New York City does.
And it's 5 times as more expensive as anything else.
Over the last year, I saw a lot of places that were, shutting down and getting hit hard. But truthfully, a lot of it was kind of starting to happen before the pandemic was hitting.
Yeah, I just kind of put it over the edge.
I can't speak for every business. It's like I don't want to come off two-dimensional and make it seem like it's a blanketed thing, but it is one of those things where, from my experience living in New York City, especially the last year, and I just moved down to Florida like a couple of weeks ago. I mean, business was fine in the summer. Like most places were actually thriving. The community is so strong. It's like, especially in Brooklyn, when people are saying it's a ghost town, when you're hearing Trump say it's a ghost town, when you're hearing the news on the right saying it's a ghost town, like they are talking about very specific places mostly within Manhattan Island, right? It's like there are a lot of places that, sure, of course, like definitely went out of business because they couldn't afford to keep the rent going. But what they're not talking about is that a lot of these places also, they close their doors because they don't need the overhead to actually have people come and shop in their location. So instead of actually trying to do what a lot of people in New York have been doing, where they just like paid, if you own a storefront or you're renting a storefront in New York, especially in Manhattan, you're spending tens of thousands of dollars a month on rent. That's not feasible. That's difficult enough as it is when business is booming, So it's one of those things where a lot of companies and a lot of businesses just literally like are not working out of an office, and they're working from home, or they're working out of a storage unit. So like it looks very different. New York is looking very, very different. And if there are people that are listening that like were poorly or like very badly affected by this, then like I apologize, not trying to generalize things or kind of like simplify it from a third party, like looking where you are and stuff. It can definitely sound and feel like really scary and stuff like that. But I can tell you for a fact that I left just a couple of weeks ago, middle of winter, and it's like restaurants are still doing fine because they do delivery. It's like the places that, like, there were a lot of restaurants during the summer that had their booths that were built outside on the actual street. So it's like, instead of eating indoors, they built like these customized like booths outside. So you had like tons of people that would be eating outdoors with plexiglass dividers, and it was very safe. And it was like people were still wearing masks. And it was great, and like they had a lot of like outdoor events where like entire avenues be like blocked off for people on the weekends just to be able to come out there and like have their barbecues and their grills and have distance, but like be outside and still be communal with their neighbors and like their businesses. It's
Yeah, I
like,
mean, if anything, maybe it's, and I even talked about this with one of my buddies too, that's from Jersey, and I was like, listen, man, I mean, when Blockbuster shut down, we were all upset,
yeah,
and
yeah.
When we used to go to Redbox all the time, but now we only do Netflix instead, like it's hard to kind of look back a year ago, 2 years
Adaptation
ago.
is hard to see. Like
It's
adaptation is a hard thing to accept.
and innovation, right? Like, I mean, the companies that maybe did shut down that do need the most help, those are probably the ones that didn't do delivery or takeout or Grubhub or Uber Eats, but that's been kind of the future for the past couple of years. And it's almost like a form of harsh, sped up capitalism to where it's giving, a couple restaurants the kick in the ass that they need, or maybe it's, doing them a favor and you're shutting down your business. Maybe you're not meant to do this type of thing. And, I even talked to my buddy that owns a couple bars in Orlando, and they had to shut down one of their 3 restaurants. And he's like, listen, bro, honestly, we had to shut it down because of COVID. Yeah, we got locked down, but that business really wasn't our best. I mean, we didn't put,
yeah. A lot of people are saying the same thing in New York, where like there are some incredible restaurants. Some of my favorite restaurants in New York that like ended up closing doors, and we were really, really, really sad and upset by it. But then it turned out later, like in interviews, like in magazines and stuff, that like they were actually writing like, no, this was a conscious decision that we made. We decided to do this because it was time. We didn't feel it was worth the fight. We didn't want to have to like do delivery because they were more like upscale. They were like just trying to plan ahead, and then when things normalize, then they're going to come back and try to revisit.
What they should do is they should just open up a restaurant in Florida, and they'll be all right. They'll be able to afford it.
Dude, anywhere. I mean, like anywhere except for New York City, like Jersey, But that being said, so people that don't know this, so we have been chatting for I think 2.5 hours already.
Yes,
and
it's been quite some time. So we should probably this is over 2 hours.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, I need to still like cook dinner, and more importantly, I think I need to use the restroom.
Yes, and I'm sure Keiko and Brenda are both really annoyed and pissed off. So we'll definitely get to.
She literally texted me. She was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm still chatting."
Yeah. So, but the good news is we'll have to do a part 2 because it's always good talking to you. We definitely don't do it enough. Yes, we don't do it enough. But now that you're in Florida.
And then also, I'll hopefully make sure that my setup is looking a lot nicer than it does now. Because if you are, I don't know if you're going to share this as a video, but if not, like it looks like total fucking garbage.
No, I'm going to share it as a video because mine looks fantastic.
Exactly. But just remember the blur face. It's just like
that's right.
My voice.
No, but ladies and gentlemen, I left his social media here on the screen. I'll leave it in the description. But at this fellow on all channels, old friend, Mr. Bobby Hicks. Thank you so much for joining us, buddy. It was a pleasure to shoot the shit with you, and I'm so happy for you and the girl. And I'm glad you guys are in the States here in Florida. And we'll definitely do this again, man.
Thanks, brother. When this is all done, we are going to hug it out for a very, very long time.
Ooh, it makes me warm just to think about. All right, my brother.